G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Where's My Yowie. Today, I'm reading an old newspaper report about Bunyips and Yowies in the 1880s, so we'll get into it. This was published in Sydney's Evening News on Saturday, the 3rd of September, 1898, titled The Bunyip and Muuroop by Harry Stockdale. Though many have heard of, but few have seen either of these celebrities, nigh upon 40 years ago, I knew most intimately a hard-working, hard-drinking bushman who, during his annual bursts, used frequently to see the bunyip, and nothing could convince him to the contrary. Can't a fellow trust to the sight of his own eyes, was one of his expressions, and I tell ya, I seen him as plain as I sees you now. He were a-swimming and a-splashing about the Lake Alexandrina, quite close inshore, and I had a good look at him. He were as big as the biggest bullock I ever handled, but he were black and covered in long hair, and he roared terrible, and I felt a shivering, as I had no gun nor ought to fight him with, and he did look as if he meant a tackling me. What confirmed my old friend Mac in his honest belief was the support of the Aboriginals, who all agreed that one sit down along a lake, and no doubt Mac did hear the roaring and strange uncanny sounds, for often, when en route with mobs of young horses to be shipped in Adelaide for the Indian market, and camped on the shores of Lake Alexandrina, I have myself heard those mysterious sounds and wondered how they were produced. That there is still some unexplained mystery attached to this, and perhaps other localities, I am ready to admit, but I must at the same time confess that personally I have visited and been familiar with many favourable localities for the Bunyip's presence, which tradition has fixed upon as his favourite haunts, and I have never seen aught in any way that I could possibly construe into the mysterious missing creature. So I have to content myself with writing about what I have never seen, and tell only what I have heard the natives say of this, their aquatic devil, and Muuroop, the devil of the woods. This, the evil spirit of terra firma, is called Muuroop in the Western District, where the belief in his existence and evil doings is much the same as it is amongst the Narrinyeri around Lake Alexandrina. The spirit is said to be fond of pretending to be a log or a burnt stump of a tree, the better to catch the unwary and unsuspecting man. A good story is told by Taplin of the belief in Malapi or Muuroop, which he obtained from one of the Narrinyeri tribe called Nugaraponi. My father saw Malapi once, said the narrator. My father had gone into the reeds to snare ducks. He took with him a long rod with a noose at the end. He had patiently sat down at the edge of the swamp until the ducks came. At last one got within reach, so he gently and skillfully let the noose fall over its head, and then suddenly dragged it out. This frightened the rest of the flock, so he got up and came away. He walked in a path through the high, thick reeds, which were far above his head, and then came to the place where they were lower, about up to his waist. All of a sudden, he heard the whir of a waddy as it flew by his head, and yet he saw nothing. Strong arms were put around him, and a great invisible being hugged him in his grasp. He had heard that Malapi sometimes thus attacks people, and that it is wisest to resist. So, although he shuddered with fear, he returned grip for grip and wrestled with the spirit. The reeds crashed and crackled under his feet as he swayed about in the struggle. He felt like a boy in the power of the Mighty One, yet he manfully returned, strain for strain. He felt faint with horror. To get away was impossible. To yield and be dragged off was awful. He put forth another effort, and fancied the unseen one yielded a little. Encouraged, he put forth all his strength and tried to throw his adversary. As he did so, with straining muscles and clenched teeth and staring eyes, he began to see a dim outline of a form like a man, and as he strove, it became plainer and plainer. He gave a wild cry, and as he did so, Muuroop burst from his grasp and disappeared. When my father came back to the camp, he was weak and tired. He told us what he had felt and seen, and always afterwards firmly believed that he had wrestled with the great Muuroop. This story is so faithful to the superstitious belief of the great tribe in existence of the devil of the woods that I have quoted it in full. No doubt the old Aborigine, who was a most powerful man and almost as hairy as an orangutan, had a great gorge and, falling asleep, was attacked with a heavy nightmare, taking the form of Muuroop, and, being a man of great courage, he struggled, and this and the fright would account for his exhaustion on reaching the camp. Also his staunch belief that he actually really encountered Muuroop. This tribe, called the Bunyip, or evil spirit of the water, Multi-Wanki, and from father to son has been handed down a tradition that an Aboriginal child was playing upon the shore when Multi-Wanki seized it and carried it off to his hiding place at the bottom of the lake's greatest depths. The father then obtained a long and strong line, which he secured around his waist, giving the other end to his fellow tribesmen to hold, while the sorcerers performed their secret incantations for the dispelling of all evil spirits. He dived to the bottom and wandered about until he came to the secret resting place of dread, Multi-Wankis, whom he had a good fortune, thanks to the incantations of the sorcerers, to find deep in the soundest of slumbers. And there was also his child, as yet unharmed. He seized the boy, and pulling strongly on the cord, as a signal to his friends above, was drawn rapidly and safely to the shore. Both father and son, but little the worse for their wonderful experience. At the head of the Herbert in Queensland, the natives believe that a monster devil walks about and eats up greedily both men and women, and that no weapon, however well aimed and strongly thrown, can hurt him. They call him Kavingam, and believe he is to be found in certain deep pools and scrubs, and on the sides of almost inaccessible mountains. Kavingam seems to be a kind of Bunyip and Muuroop, or wood devil, all in one, and no doubt, so far as the natives are concerned, is equal to the occasion. In the Western District of Victoria, the natives have a tradition that two brothers went out gathering swan's eggs, and that after having obtained a good haul, the younger brother would return alone into the very depths of an immense swamp to obtain more eggs, when he was seized and disemboweled by the Bunyip. The elder brother after waiting a long time, made a fire on his bark canoe and set out in search of the missing one. He found him by a big swan's nest, dead, and nearby a huge bunyip. He took away the body without interference from the bunyip, which they say only eats of the inside of men and women. The body was then burned, only the bones of arms and legs being saved as relics by new relatives. Amongst the early settlers, the bunyip was a recognised animal, owing to the persistency of the natives in their various accounts of it. Consequently, it was much sought after, regardless of the dreadful character the Aboriginals have given it for ferocity. Some descriptions represented it as having an enormous body, covered with hair and feathers, with a large head and mouth. Its habits were mysterious, always appearing suddenly and when least expected. Its voice was peculiar, as if it was capable of both roaring in the most terrible manner and of emitting a succession of shrill shrieks. All these deep pools that are supposed to be frequented or be the homes of the bunyip are never entered either for bathing or fishing. There have been from time to time some remarkable accounts in the columns of the press anent the bunyip. One of the most remarkable appeared in the Wagga Express. The bunyip has again been seen twice within the last 3 months in the waters of Cowell Lake in March last 1873 by a party of surveyors, whose account can be relied upon, who were out in a boat and saw the animal about 150 yards off. They describe it to have a head something resembling a human being, or in their own words, like an old man Aboriginal with long dark coloured hair. When seen, it appeared to be going in a straight direction, rising out of the water so that they could see its shoulders, and then diving, as if in chase of fish, and rising again at intervals of about 6 or 8 yards, and diving again. They tried to get closer to it, but could not for the pace it was going. Consequently, could give no description of it lower than the shoulders. They say the animal did not appear to be afraid of them, but most likely it was so intent upon its occupation that it never noticed them. Again, an Aborigine and a white man who were out in a canoe say they saw it about a fortnight since. They agree in giving the same description of the head and hair as that given by the surveyors. The animal was swimming straight towards them, and when it saw them, dived and disappeared. The bunyip, or evil spirit of the deep waters, must not be confounded with the land demon Muuroop, who terrifies superstitious natives at night time. This bad spirit comes in various shapes and forms, as lightning, meteors, and as a huge Aboriginal man of immense power and very ugly, frequenting lonely places, scrubs and thickets of brush. He is said to be so rapid in his movements that no ordinary man can hope to escape him, either by flight or combat, and to possess an inordinate longing for the eating of little children. He is armed with great numbers of most deadly spears, which he throws with unerring aim, and in his wake follow myriads of the most venomous snakes that obey his call. He is said to dwell in some deep and all but inaccessible caves which no Aboriginal would dream of going near. Muuroop is said to be great friends with the owl, a bird much disliked by the natives, which he calls Kokok Rokok, the owl's cry. This bird is ever on the alert to discover any wanderer from the camp, and warn Muuroop of his whereabouts, and is both hated and dreaded by Aboriginals. A friend of mine informed me that he read an account of the Bunyip by some authority who had actually seen the strange creature no less than 3 different times. What deed of merit had he done to be so specially favoured? I did not hear, but surely after the Bunyip itself, the next sight worth seeing would be the man who actually thrice seen one. A fellow Sydneyite, the Honourable Dr. Creed, has a very pleasant theory in regarding the identity of the Bunyip. He argues, and with some considerable force, that the Bunyip may have been some large aquatic animal now extinct in these waters, such as the great crocodile, and quotes in support of his theory the indisputable fact that these animals were once quite common a great deal south of their present habitation. This is established by the fact of fossil teeth, mineralised, that have been found on the south side of the Barwon. The end. Well, that was some interesting stories. I'd just like to talk about a few things. So in the first story, when they're talking about the Malapi or the Malape, the devil of the woods, and he's also known as the evil spirit of terra firma, the Muuroop. And they're saying that it's very fond of pretending to be a log or a burnt tree stump. And then the guy that was catching ducks, he heard a waddy go flying past his head, but he saw nothing. And then he felt the strong arms put around him, and a great invisible being had him, and then eventually he could see it. To me, that sounds like a Yowie from like the log and the burnt tree stump, because that's what they look like if they stand still. And being an invisible being, was that just his way of saying that it was like super well camouflaged until it was virtually on top of him and had hold of him? And then the next story they're talking about at the head of the Herbert in Queensland, where they're saying that the monster devil walks about and eats greedily both men and women, and that no weapon can hurt him or kill him, no matter how powerfully thrown or whatever. And they call him Kvingan, Kvingan, and they find him like in certain pools and scrubs and on the sides of almost inaccessible mountains. That sounds like a Yowie to me as well. And then they mention about the Bunyip they seen in Cow Lake. This is interesting to me, just by the description of it, because like 2 lots of guys seen it, and they both describe it as being like an old man Aboriginal with long dark coloured hair, but they only seen it from the shoulders down. And I was wondering if that was a Yowie chasing fish and swimming after fish, or it was just a seal that they think was a Bunyip. Anyway, we don't know. And then finally they get back on, they're talking about the Muuroop again, and they sound like it terrifies natives of the night time, and it comes in various forms as lightning, meteors, and as an ugly, huge Aboriginal man of immense power and very ugly. That sounds like a Yowie to me. And then especially when they're saying that his rapids are so quick, his movements are so quick that no ordinary man can escape him, and you can't like fight him or run away from him. And he also eats little children. It's very interesting. And then we'll get on to Harry Stockdale, the guy that wrote this article. He was an artist, a sketcher, a collector, an explorer, and a horseman. He was born in 1841 and came to Australia in the 1860s. And then he travelled around Australia in the 1880s doing sketches, and he amassed a large collection of artefacts as well. And then by 1903, he decided he wanted to sell his collection, and he had like over 1,000 specimens, including island spears, glass and flint-headed spears, boomerangs, tomahawks, bull roars, and fighting picks. And he was trying to sell them, and so the curator of the City Museum wanted to buy them, and he couldn't buy them because Mr. Stockdale, Harry Stockdale, wanted way too much money for them. And so the guy decided that he had like £25 to spend, which is a lot of money in those days. So he'd just go to the auction and try and buy them. And then, just before the auction started, a couple of nights beforehand, Harry Stockdale's place burnt down to the ground, which I find really interesting. Is that like because he was trying to sell Aboriginal artifacts, and it just like goes to show you shouldn't be trying to sell stuff that doesn't belong to you. Okay, that's it for me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.